Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Accenture's COP26 venue. We will begin our session in 5 minutes. Please begin to find your seats and make yourself comfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We will begin the session in 2 minutes. As a reminder, please take a moment to silence all mobile devices before the session begins.
families are the toughest measure, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrew Jack from the Financial Times. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here in Glasgow, to our assembled guests, and also to many others of you watching online. So over the next hour, we're going to talk about accelerating the delivery of net zero commitments. And we've got a great panel here to talk from different sectoral perspectives about progress here in Glasgow at COP26 and beyond over the coming years. So I've got Jean-Marc Ollagnier, the Chief Executive of Accenture Europe, Simon Eves on the far side, the Chief Executive for UK and Ireland of Accenture, Gregor Alexander, the CFO of SSE, Karol Gobzinski, Head of Climate and Energy at Inca Group, and Constance Schalscha, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer of BNP Paribas. So we're going to discuss. We'll hopefully have a few minutes at least towards the end for your questions as well. But let me turn first of all to Jean-Marc for a few introductory remarks.
So thanks, Andrew, and welcome to all of you, because it's always great to be in those events. I have the privilege to have seen a couple of COP before this one. And I think reflecting on how we can accelerate this agenda to net zero, I was willing to share 3 observations that I think can help us to launch the debate on hopefully good food for thought for all of you. First observation is what is different this time, maybe compared to many other sessions we have, is the mobilization of the business. And I think that's important at the time we say we need to accelerate. I think we clearly see among all the different surveys that has been produced by us and others that the level of mobilization of the business leaders is second to none. Couple of numbers. So first of all, nearly everybody, 70 to 80%, have either a plan or are working on it in terms of net zero agenda. But I think we already have 30% that have a committed plan to net zero agenda already in place. And those 30% are covering, when you look at the listed company, 2/3 of the global emission. So we have 30% of the business which is already committed and is significant in terms of the emission. I think what is even more important today is that the pace is continuing to accelerate, and this is really important when you look at what we have to do collectively. So that's the first message. The second message is what we have to deal with is not simple. It's clearly a true transformation. It's a bit like we have seen in digital a couple of years back, and we say today that sustainability is the next digital for some reason, because it is true transformation. It's not about adjusting a proof of concept or making a pilot left and right. This is about changing the way we do business. I have the privilege in my role to talk to many executives around different industries. When you talk to the energy sector with renewable, on energy transition, when you talk to the automotive sector with new mobility on electricity, when you talk to consumer good company with everything related to sustainable product on multi-channel distribution, we are talking around transformation of the way we do business. So it's time for good CEOs to really have the vision, to mobilize the team, to make it happen. And that's what we are seeing today is we see true transformation happening across the different sectors, and that's encouraging as well. Third observation is, well, we're going to need a lot of innovation. Some of it is already available, which is a good news. Some of it will happen. Some of it is not yet at the right price points. So there is a lot of discussion around how the different industry sector can achieve a net zero agenda in a sustainable way in terms of business performance. But I think when I look at the one topic I know the most, which is digital technology, is nearly ready already. And I think that's important to share because we believe that the companies that will navigate this successfully will be the ones that are creating this digital backbone in a sustainable way. And you cannot be only a digital business if you are not sustainable. And what we see is that if you want to become sustainable, you need a lot of technology. And you need that technology in order to allow the different business model. And I can give you plenty of examples. We know that leveraging the cloud technology, you can do that with Green Cloud. We know that if you want to change customer behavior or influence customer behavior to try to sell the most friendly product, artificial intelligence and data can make the difference. We know also for supply chain that artificial intelligence, blockchain technology can also make the difference. We also know that if you want to enable circular economy business model, you need platform technology in order either to resell, to recycle, or to repurpose what you have done in terms of your product. So digital and sustainability are fully intertwined. We even call it twin transformation, just to make the point around how intertwined they are. So with those observations, where are we? After it's a question of belief, some are optimistic, some are pessimistic. I am personally optimistic because I really believe that there is no plan B. So we have to make it work. This mobilization of the business sector is required. We are talking about investment that we have rarely seen in terms of the transformation we have to do across all the different businesses. This will require mobilization of all the different stakeholders, government, obviously, citizen, but also the business, which will provide the investment capacity and the ability to provide the technology at the right price point. Many of them are already available, some will become available, but this mobilization I see today in this COP, but I see also in this panel, with many industries which are representative, make me feel we are on something that is encouraging. So back to you, Andrew.
So thanks very much. So we'll come back to a number of those important points you raised, but we've got here all sorts of different sectors from banking and finance, energy, retail and manufacturing, consulting. Let's do a first round to get a sense from each of you about what your own organisations and the sectors you're in are doing, what progress you're making towards net zero. Constance.
So I represent the finance industry in this panel, and as you know, finance is not there by itself. Our net zero commitment only works if all our clients are going to be net zero. So as a bank, we're here to enable, to accelerate the flow of capital onto the positive project and to facilitate the transformation of our clients. For us, everything that's happening is a blessing, but it's something that we started a while ago. We implemented ESG consideration into decision-making as early as 10 years ago. We had sectorial policy framing what we want to do, what we don't want to do. We started proactively managing our portfolio, exiting the tar sand, exiting unconventional oil and gas specialized company. Back in 2017, we were among the first banks to have a clear exit of thermal coal back in 2019. So net zero is just another step. What we view extremely positively is that it's a collective step. So this collective action is going to boost, it's going to accelerate the trend, it's going to exacerbate trend. And I think at this stage, our most important consideration is how do we ensure that this huge movement is done in a fair, in a just manner. And we do this by engaging very intensively with our client, making sure they understand that we're here to help them. We have amazing views on all sectors. So I've been personally dealing with clients in every single sector, every single region. Clients want to transform themselves. We are there with a knowledge of what investors are expecting. And we can advise our client to do it in a step change way, but in a way which respects the fact that we cannot unplug the world today. We need to ensure that this transformative change is done while enabling people to continue to work, to continue to heat their house, to continue to care for themselves, to continue to move. So I think compared to what you were, the comparison you were doing with digital, I think digital, we didn't unplug. It was coming on top of existing activity. Here, the risk is how do we manage to do this transition in a way which is not leaving people on the side of the road, but to do it in a way which is fast enough to go in the right direction and to align everyone to a 1.5 degree scenario.
And just talking about your own internal portfolio, if you look at your loan portfolio, what share today is in fossil fuel related organizations?
So it depends on how you look at it, but one figure which I think is extremely striking to me is out of all the power projects that we've been financing last year, 82% were renewable energy projects. Out of all the projects, not power only, but all the projects that we financed last year, 40% of them were renewable energy related. That gives you a magnitude of the momentum that we did, because when we stop financing specialized companies in unconventional oil and gas, the goal is to re-inject this capital into something which is positive, but not to stop there, to also mobilize the financial community to go with us on those massive investments that are required, as you were rightly pointing out, but also to go with us on those technological bets, because I think today we need to finance 2 times at the same time. We need to finance existing technology that will take us to 2030 with minus 40% CO2 reduction, but we also need to finance the R&D that will be required to do the 2030, 2050 path. And those technologies, as you were rightly pointing out, are today not mature enough. So it's a matter of mobilizing capital to finance those different options that are likely to become what will help the world to change for the better.
So have you set a date yet for when you will stop any new financing of fossil fuel-related projects?
We have set a date for coal, so we are exiting gradually all clients that will not be out of coal by 2030 for OECD country and 2040 for the rest of the world.
That's all coal or just thermal coal?
Thermal coal.
Thermal coal.
We've also stopped financing 3 years ago any new coal development. As far as oil and gas is concerned, I think it's too early to make drastic moves, just because there's not necessarily in some countries the right alternatives in sufficient scale and mass to be able to continue power the economies. So what we decided is, as part of our net zero target, to have an interim milestone commitment, which is minus 10% reduction of our credit portfolio of exploration and production of oil and gas. It might sound small, but it's on top of the massive reduction that we've done in unconventional oil and gas, which we were, again, the first bank of the 35 biggest bank to do back in 2017.
Okay, so Gregor, tell us a little bit more. SSE, obviously, a big energy producer, historically, presumably significant production from fossil fuels. How is your progress? Where are you at in terms of setting an objective for zero fossil fuel production?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been on this journey for a fair amount of time, as you'd expect. We are the largest renewable generator in the UK. We have thermal generation as well when we need to keep the lights on, so we need a balance. We're building the largest offshore wind farm in the world at Dogger Bank, and if you want to sign the turbine, you just go onto our website and you can sign in and allocate there. It's all good fun. We just got Boris to do it and the Chancellor yesterday. We're building the deepest offshore wind farm in Scotland at Seagreen. One of the stats there was that our structures for that wind farm will be 20 times the structures of the Eiffel Tower. That's a great stat. And we're building one of the most efficient onshore wind farms in Shetland. So we're doing a lot, but we've also got thermal. So where have we gone in targets? Well, we kind of feel that we're probably 2/3 on our way to net zero. If I look at just carbon emissions, in 2018, on a baseline of 2008, we probably halved our emissions to 10 million tonnes. We have a target of 6 million tonnes for 2030, but that's on a kind of pathway well below 2 degrees. But can we look at a new target? We're looking at that at the moment. We'll probably announce something in the next few weeks on that target, but to do the maths, you can work backwards, and that would require us to get to 3 million tonnes by 2030 to get to kind of close to a 1.5 degree pathway. And we think that's achievable. We think it's really important with COP that companies have their own kind of pathway that they're progressing. I'm not really great into people pushing you. You know, boards have to really want to really move forward, and that's something that SSE has been doing consistently in the world of sustainability. If it comes to natural capital, social capital, we're the first company, we believe, in the world to do a 20-point just transition, and just transition is really important. You know, we're not going to overnight change how things go, and we need to take jobs with us. So targets are there to revise, and I think we're going to be coming out with some really interesting targets in the next few weeks.
So just give us a scoop then. What's the sort of time frame to be zero fossil fuel?
Well, zero fossil fuel is more challenging. Because we need to keep the lights on in the UK, and UK and Ireland, which is predominantly where we're based at the moment, is a very tight market because of the interconnection coming from Europe and likewise. And we've seen, even this week, we went from around 12 gigawatts of wind at the start of the week to 1 gigawatt in one day. And that meant prices went from 50, 60, 70 pounds a megawatt to 4,000 pounds a megawatt. So we need to keep some of that fossil fuel technology. And we're building Europe's most efficient CCGT at Keadby 2. And we have plans then to do carbon capture and hydrogen. So as we get into the 2030s, I would expect to see that decarbonisation even accelerate more. To say whether that's going to be 2035 or 2040, time will tell. But I would expect most plants to be carbon neutral into the late 30s, something like that.
Okay, so Carol, tell us a little bit about IKEA and what you're doing. What targets have you set for net zero?
Yeah. First of all, it's important to follow the science, and I think that's the same for businesses and for governments. We need to get to net zero before 2050, and we need to halve the emissions by 2030. And we all need to do it. That's what we know. And then the parties, and this is amazing as well to hear during the COP as well, to see that we are much more aligned already on that one. So I think it's when you enter different rooms and you start to say, okay, we are talking about the same, we see the progress. I think this is great. Then the second progress where we need to see much more, it's connected to action. And to be able to halve the emissions by 2030 as IKEA, we need to, first of all, secure 100% renewable energy use across the value chain. Today, 50% of energy use in production and 50% in operations is coming from renewable sources. And to make it happen, we need to invest. And Inca Group invested 2.5 billion euro in wind and solar. We own actually and operate the wind farms and solar farms. We just acquired first project in Russia, and we are first non-energy utility company that has done it. And we are looking for more because we need to enter new markets where we have not invested yet. And that's why we committed additional 4 billion euro until 2030 to enable this transition to renewable energy. And of course, it's not only about renewable energy generation consumption, it's about electrification. That's why we said all the deliveries that we'll have to our customers needs to be zero emission by 2025, and we are working hard to make it happen. Then it's about electrification when it comes to heating as well, and heating our buildings, and that's really looking forward to discuss it further. Then the second part, because as you know, IKEA is offering products, and customers are clear. They want to act. We are doing climate action research every second year to understand where people are, and we see 9 out of 10 people will say, we want to act, we want to be part of the solution. But only like 4 or 5 people out of 10 are saying, we are doing enough. And when we are asking why you are not doing more, it's clear. Governments are not supporting us with relevant regulations to enable to do it faster. Businesses are not making it affordable and convenient enough. Such a business opportunity. And that's why when we talk a lot, it's so challenging. Business is here to take on the challenges and turn this into opportunity. If you are not able to do that, you are out of the business. And I think net zero transition will impact all the businesses. And from the circular perspective, I think it's the biggest transition because it's touching everything, how we design the products, how we meet the customers, how we design the circular flows, which are not only happening within our operations, but actually within the society. And that's why we invested, for example, in recycling a company of mattresses in Netherlands to enable that we are actually recycling the same amount of mattresses as being disposed within the country. And this, of course, creates new materials which are going into the circular flows. And maybe even they are not connected today to our products, they will be in the future. So I think, and this transition is happening on different level of organizations. So designers are assessing the products. And 9,500 IKEA products were assessed based on the circular principles. And now the roadmaps are being developed to secure that all the products are becoming circular by 2030 to be able to turn into circular business model. And the third element is connected to materials, of course, because when you're in the retail sector and you're offering physical products, big part of your footprint is connected to materials. And that's why using only renewable and recycled materials by 2030, it's a big topic, of course, with lower climate footprint. And this will enable us, of course, to bring the emissions down. And we said, yeah, but we can do more because we are actually interacting with people, so we can help people at home to reduce climate footprint. So what if we will start to offer home solar, for example, in some of the markets to speed up that people are part of the solution? And that's what we are constantly developing and innovating. And that's what coworkers and customers expect from us. If we don't act, we don't have the best talents, and we don't have customers in the future.
So Simon, let's talk a bit about just internally first within Accenture. So what are you doing? I mean, obviously you're not a direct huge consumer or polluter, but nonetheless, what are your objectives on net zero?
Yeah, and I just wanted to compliment Carol actually, because interestingly, I do think the IKEA rebrand and how it has shifted itself is one of the most powerful examples. The brand has changed in our house from some very tough taskmasters who had a certain view, and it's an example of when it can work with bravery. So I think it's just really well noted. So where are we? Look, Accenture's got a net zero by 25. We'll be fully renewable by 23. The UK and Ireland is already renewable. So that sounds good, but I think we also need to have humility. We're a people-based business where it's often office and travel. So relative to many organizations, right, our game is fairly easy for our own. We have therefore gone above that. We committed recently at Global Citizen Live to standalone projects to go above and beyond, which will deliver about 30 million metric tons. Standalone projects to seek to do more, akin to IKEA. Basically, you've just got to do more if you're in that position. But then, Andrew, where do we really make a difference? The reality is much more where Jean-Marc went, which is where do we place our investments? So for us, if you take something like blockchain, which clearly has a negative view around its consumption of electricity and one of its potential drivers, we are putting huge investment at the front of green software to make sure for clients we're not coding in to clients expensive code. We look at how we work with our partners around how you do cloud software and basically prove the green credentials of that. We're investing in engineering of products and manufacturing to make sure that they're as green as possible. So where we can really help, Andrew, is to place a lot of our investment, our R&D, at the front end here. And that's how we'll do much more of an impact for the world than our own, because, as I say, our own relative to folks on this panel is easy, and we need to recognize that.
So I'll come back to technology in a second, but first of all, let's just talk about pressure points, where the demand for change is really coming from. I mean, Simon, perhaps initially, but we've seen a lot of activists now sort of focusing not just on the direct energy consumers and producers, but also media organizations, consultants, all sorts of others. I mean, are you feeling that pressure to ultimately even pull back from advising, for example, clients that are engaged in fossil fuels?
It's interesting. I mean, like, philosophically, activism could be considered social innovation. I don't recoil from it. Where would we be without the suffragette movement? I mean, I just think we need to recognize that people have causes and take them on. Secondly, the vast majority of work that we're doing with those companies, which people might consider, are actually businesses seeking to reinvent themselves, what we would call an ESG world. Clients in those industries aren't phoning us up to do the old stuff. They know how to do their old business. What they're phoning us up to do is work out how they, in effect, get into new business, new products. We call it, like everyone's got to have a new product, a new service for the new consumer. And everyone is reinventing. So we've got a level of pride in the work that we're doing with those companies, which, you could stand there and say they've got to die. You could actually seek to continue, not leave people socially by the wayside, and help reinvent their businesses for this future. So we're seeing that as a big growth area in what might be considered the toughest industries, those ones which are very fossil fuel based, all the way through to those like in retail that are seeking to reinvent themselves.
And Constance, for the bank, for example, are you feeling a lot of pressure from investors, from clients directly? Where is the pressure really to accelerate the move to net zero?
I do believe the investor community is extremely active. And it was very interesting because we saw a gradual shift. It started with exclusion policies from asset managers, excluding certain sectors in what they were investing, to something which is today demanding a lot more proactive management, portfolio management, as well as true impact. So I think if there's one way where the change is going to come is from those investors, whether they are B2B like asset managers, but also the retail investors. Today we have a new generation starting to work, starting to make money, who demand to have impact when they invest. So our ability as bank to deliver products that are not only good when it comes to returns on investment, but also good when it comes to impact is absolutely critical. It's a must. Now the question is, how do you do this in a world where there's heavier regulation, where there's massive volatility? I mean, we all saw the price of energy in the past few months, and you want to make sure that you deliver to retail customers very safe products. So it's a matter of being able to assemble the right blend between investment grade, safe bet that are still very green when it comes to impact, together with solutions that are financing things that are a little bit long-term, maybe with a little bit more risk, but that can deliver massive impact. So, I think it's a big pressure from the investor community.
And Gregor, as Constance was just saying, we've seen that the shock around energy prices. Is that changing the level of pressure or the temper of change from customers as well as investors about how rapidly you can move realistically to net zero?
Well, I think, Andrew, it's quite interesting. If you go back a year ago, decarbonisation was really at the centre of what people were focusing on in the UK. The trilemma, affordability, security of supply, really weren't part of the equation. We've now got the three of them back. And that affordability issue is only just starting because we have a winter period where gas prices are 3 or 4 times where they were a year ago, and that has to get passed on to consumers. We don't have a domestic retail business anymore because we sold our domestic retail business to OVO a couple of years ago because we wanted to focus on renewables and networks, which is at the core of net zero. But ultimately, going in a decarbonising world initially will cost more. Ultimately, long term, we will see the benefits coming through. And governments have to decide whether that gets passed to consumers directly or whether it goes through the tax system. And where we are in the UK, it's going directly to customers. It's a challenge. But we need to gain the right for legitimacy, and that's why the supply chain for all the renewables that are coming through into the UK, that supply chain needs to create jobs. The last 10 years it didn't create significant jobs. The next 10 years it has to, so that consumers can see the benefit of being part of that net zero world. And we are starting to see turbine manufacturers, tower manufacturers come into the UK, and hopefully we'll start taking that forward over the next 5 to 10 years when the UK moves from currently around 10 gigawatts of offshore wind to 40 gigawatts, the biggest offshore wind market in the world.
And Carol, from your perspective, is it consumers that are driving the change? Is it the fact that you have this, a foundation owner that perhaps a little bit less exposed to market pressures? Where's really the emphasis and the transition pressure coming from?
I think, first of all, it's responsibility. I think we all are sitting here, we are humans, and we share the same home, which is planet. We don't have place to go. So when you ask yourself or ask your board, we need to act. It's like, whatever you will tell, that's the only way forward. So I think it's part of the responsibility that we all need to accept in our private life as well as professional life. Because a lot of discussion was like how much work I need to do at home, sorting the waste, buying less, turning to the plant-based options. But we rarely say, what is my role at work, when my impact could be much higher, actually, to reduce emissions. And so it's very much about responsibility. And our coworkers have feeling of this responsibility, and they are asking to act. And I think we all should, within the company, agree that that's the only way forward. So first of all, bringing to the board, and I think maybe that's something what our vision is helping us, because we say that our vision is to create better everyday life for the many people. There is no better everyday life for the many people for 3-4 degrees scenario, because the basic human rights are already being impacted by the access to food, water, housing, impact on health, and people's lives at the end. So if we will look from this perspective and our values, this is very clear why we are doing that. And then customers, of course, but where we see the research, like it's amazing to see people engage, and people are looking for the solution. People desire solution. People live in guilt because of the doing negative parts during the daily life. Such a business opportunity, again. So if you will be able to enable people to live without the guilt and reduce footprint, you are the winner of the future. And that's why the net zero is a new growth model. The cost structure and revenue structure within the net zero economy will change. And if you would like to see how it will change, do your climate risk assessment financial analysis. TCFD framework, really great way forward to convince your board and show within 3 and 4 degrees scenario, none of the companies is able to mitigate the risks. Total disruption. Under 1.5 degrees, there are risks, what was mentioned. There might be additional costs, which I don't consider as a cost. It's an investment, in a way. It's the best investment we can take to change. And maybe we need to invest more, but the cost actually will go down. So the why is very clear, in a way. We just need to get it done and align on that one while together. And that's, I think, why it's important that such a big presence we see at COP, coming from the business sector, coming together from representing finance, retail, transport, energy, to have this common way forward and have roadmaps. And that's why roadmaps which are coming from Race to Zero are so important. What we are missing is governments, policies, and regulations now. It's great to have long-term commitments, but they can become sleeping pills. And that's what we need to avoid.
So, Jean-Marc, do we need, so as we've heard, there's a lot of activity, mobilization, as you were saying earlier, by business. What's missing? Do we need more from governments, from regulators to set the guidelines and the guardrails?
Look, as I say, I remember all of this. There was a time where it was more government-driven, the business was not there. Now we have both, and I think what we need is to create the right, mobilization hand by hand. In fact, what you need today is that business mobilization is really good. There was also sectors that are not present here. You will hear the same story, which I think I take that as a strong encouragement because we need to accelerate. And to accelerate, probably yes, business needs to come back to governments to suggest policies that can accelerate. Because what business can do is massive investments, and that's what we need in order to develop those innovations on new technologies that's going to solve some of the big challenges we have. But what business will ask in return of those investments is clarity of the framework. Clarity of the framework around, the different taxonomy of energy, clarity of the framework potentially about the price of carbon at some point in time, clarity of framework around regulation, around what is really encouraged in terms of mobility, in terms of energy transition. Those things are what matters for business, and we have to improve. We have to improve because it is important that this mobilization of the business is now recognized by government, and when we define policies for the next 30 years, because all of this, as you say, we need to go for 2030 first, and we need to accelerate a bit. But it's not over by 2030. We need another 20 years of massive investments to get to the right destination, and that will require an iteration of those policy framework in order to ensure that we drive the right investment in the right place. This is not the optimal system right now, and this is, you know, if you have looked at what we published recently around the UN report we have done with Global Compact, which is, you know, one of the institutions we are working with, it is clear that what is expecting from COP is clear direction around this 1.5 degree scenario that we are looking for, but also clarity of the frame. That is really important in order to accelerate the investment. And it's true that what we need, we all know today that the awareness is there, the mobilization is there, there's good pledge coming from all over the place, but we are not yet at the right pace. And the pace will come with the investment from the private sector in a business-friendly regulation that encourage people to invest. The financial services institution, as you remind us, but also, frankly, all the different private sector, which will develop the solution we need. And without this positive circle, well, we will not move fast enough. And I think it's not, you know, business pointing out lack of government regulation or the other way around. I think it's working together to say we're going to need different regulation in order to accommodate something which we have to deal with some humility. I'm not sure we have ever seen an investment into the economy like the one we see for the next 30 years. We have, you know, when you look at the history of the economy, this is pretty unique time. So we will have to revise some policy from time to time to adjust, because some will work, some may not work. But what we need is $1 trillion of investments per year, not $1 billion of investment. And I have no other solution to find $1 trillion investment than to mobilize all stakeholders, but certainly the large business, because they are the only one that can truly contribute to that kind of scale. And that will require this positive dialogue. That's why those events are important, because it is a place where regulator, government, and business can align point of view. We'll not fix everything this week or next week, but we are getting into the direction we need, which will provide this level of acceleration for 2030. But from every survey we have done, what we're going to do in the next 10 years is very important. But we're going to have to keep accelerating from 2030 to 2050 if we want to achieve the right scenario. So it is a long-term journey. The next 10 years is critical, but the 20 years after is still very important and will require that huge mobilization of investment that we have to accept. None of us have done that before. So, you know, we have to accept this is a unique scenario. But I think what makes me feel positive is the mobilization of, you know, all of us, you know, because all of us, we are citizens, we are consumers, we are employees, and sometimes it's the same person. And everything is pointing to the direction that we want to work for the right company that are doing not only good product and good financial return, but do the right things for the planet. It is the same for the consumer, which wants to buy sustainable product, and the IKEA example is great in that regard. And this mobilization for me is incredibly important because the next generation of leaders are coming with that mindset.
So Constance, we've seen initiatives in the US and, of course, in Europe around reporting guidelines and frameworks. You know, but there's still huge accusations, aren't there, of inconsistency and greenwashing around ESG, for example. Do we need more regulation or clear government-driven guidelines to try to create a more coherent reporting framework?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I think to avoid greenwashing. So first, I do strongly believe the world of sustainable finance is bringing overall lots of good things. It's channeling capital, it's rewarding efforts. So overall, it's good. Now, that said, we've seen greenwashing. And I think first even before even talking about regulation, the first thing is a company has to have a plan before doing sustainable finance. They have to have a sustainability plan, they have to have an action plan, and finance is there to enable this plan. First way to do it. Second way, companies need to ensure materiality of what they're committing to and ambitiousness of what they're committing to. We cannot afford to have anecdotal commitments on very, very serious matter. I think we're way past this. Today, it has to have, and I think that's what we've seen in COP26, we have to deliver impact that matters. And then, once you have those key principles installed, having common standards, having the same way to compute a given indicator, the same way to report a given indicator, and having the right auditing frameworks that will stamp and validate those reporting will ensure the entire financial community to have comparability, to be able to see that the KPI on this indicator for company A is much better, much more ambitious than for company B. So regulation does help tremendously. Alignment across region does help tremendously because you would rather have banks focusing on channeling resources onto productive projects rather than spending time doing reporting. It's simple. So we're very much in favor of global harmonization of standards, but we're very much in favor of standards.
Gregor, where do you stand on this? There's a lot of talk, isn't there, about impact-weighted accounts and so on. Do you see the need to evolve? How are you trying to report, sticking your neck out perhaps compared to some of your peers in terms of measuring the true costs?
Yeah, I think I come from an environment where I think we have to standardisation, but we've got to simplify. I mean, I've been around a long time, and when international financial reporting came in to 15 odd years ago, we suddenly changed from an environment where people could understand accounts to the technical people were really behind them. So we've got to standardise. We've got to standardise on the things that really matter, and sometimes we just standardise everything and we lose focus. I think that's really important. Clearly, the announcement that came out yesterday at COP is very good. And, I think we will hopefully take that forward, and I think the ISSB, as it's now been called, will standardise that. All I would say is that let's try and make sure that we don't overcomplicate it and people can understand what they're reading rather than have some technical person explain it to them. That's really important to me. I come from, when I started as accountant, the statements of accounting practice were that thick. Ethics, prudency and matching. And we need to get back to some of that kind of clear guidelines for people to really understand accounts.
Let's talk about another announcement this week. Carol, we had this discussion about deforestation targets, didn't we? Although maybe the aspirations are way beyond the actual feasibility of achieving them. But you're a big consumer, for example, of wood. How will you be affected by that?
Yeah, before I will go into this topic, I think to add to the standardization, last week the Science Based Target Initiative actually published the standard and criteria. What does it mean to set net zero target within the corporate sector, aligned with science? So we have one framework which is clearly saying it's about scope 1, 2, and 3. It's not scope 1 and 2 and say like, oh, I'm net zero. This is done. It is about considering all of it, and there are as well the pathways, sectoral pathways that you can follow. So I think this is amazing that we have this standardization. It brings much bigger alignment as well within the corporate sector and transparency. And transparency, at the end, create the trust, what we need between the governments, between the businesses and individuals, so we start to trust within the actions we are taking together. When it comes to forestry, wood, it's very important material for IKEA. It's, of course, renewable, recyclable, and durable, and beautiful. At the end, IKEA have been working for years when it comes to FSC standard and been one of the companies that actually been working from the beginning on establishing FSC certification. In 2020, IKEA reached the goal of 98% of the wood is FSC certified or coming from recycling. After meeting this goal, IKEA set new goals to aim for increasing drastically the recycled wood in the products by 2030, reaching 1/3 of wood used within the products, and continue with regeneration agenda on the forest within the value chain and beyond. And great that there is a big focus, because we know that deforestation is happening and it's connected a lot to agriculture actually and food production, and this is what needs to be overcome, and we need a lot of focus. So happy that it's coming on the agenda.
And are you still heavily reliant on offsets to try and meet your targets?
Yeah. As science-based targets said, offsets are not part of the solution for the net zero. You can take actions going. What is offset actually? You know, because if we will say offset is about paper, I think we are too far from the action. Because based on the standard for net zero, it's clearly set. You need to reduce emissions of your value chain by 90% or 95% to get to net zero, and then you can compensate with durable removals the rest. Of course, companies can take much bigger role than reducing as well your value chain, which is top priority, no doubts, by going beyond the value chain and taking investments. But business is about not buying cheap offset paper. It's about how you take relevant investment, which is enabling you to be relevant within a net zero economy and integrate within your business. That's the first one. And the second, how you are taking investments to meet the customer needs. And I think that's what we need to we need a bit mind shift change, that the carbon offset became the buzzword, but I think we are passing, this word and moving forward. And the new part is about actions which are taken beyond the value chain.
But if I may, I totally agree with you. Offset have to be additional on top of everything that you need to do. However, we shouldn't criticize too much offset. Offsets today, for companies willing to do offsets, that means companies are ready to reforest. That means companies are ready, through offsetting, to invest in projects that are truly positive. And it's one of the only projects that are truly positive, either for the environment or the society. So for me, even though I'm always trying to see offset as the last mile and what you need to do on top of, I'm very much in favor of any company who, even if they are not at minus 90%, would like to still offset. Because if a company is ready to offset today, even if they've only done 20% of the journey, that means this company is ready to support reforestation. This company is ready to support society improvement in underdeveloped countries, and all of this is extremely positive. So that's why we're seeing tremendous growth in those markets, but I do strongly believe carbon markets can be part of the solution, because basically you're bringing a value to something which has tremendously positive impact. And we should all encourage it.
And just to add, because I think philanthropic part of organization always should be rewarded. Mm-hmm. But it's not always should be claim based to say like you are good based on this climate agenda and you are net zero. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. I fully agree. IKEA Foundation is as well the philanthropic arm and is doing many projects, but it doesn't mean that automatically this making us net zero company in a way. So I think I fully agree on that.
But Simon, offsets and sometimes net zero pledges. I mean, there is a little bit this sense sometimes, isn't there, of, can we all get something for nothing? Could it all be win-win without sacrifice? And there's certainly a strain of argument, isn't there, about techno-optimism. Technology will solve the problems and we can continue to grow and not really have to worry about making sacrifices. Is that still really credible, or do we need to go further, even with some short-term pain?
Well, I think if you look at technology in the broader sense, so you'd say include Bill Gates' new 4 nascent technologies. In that sense, technology, I think everyone would recognise as an underpinning. It's all underpin nearly everything that this panel represents. When I sit back and look now where we're at in this discussion, I wonder whether we're going from sort of keeping 1.5 alive to actually this being the COP where there was 5 alive. And my 5 could be that there's the deforestation announcement, there's a methane announcement, there's the 130 trillion announcement, there's the IFRS announcement, and actually for the UKI, and this is interesting, UK in particular, was the announcement from Rishi that by 2023, and this might not be pleasant for everybody on the panel, but that everybody who trades in the UK on the FTSE will need to have announced their own transition plan, which will be measured by a sustainability board. It's kind of an interesting step in this movement, as the question came, of government collaboration and pushing businesses. Now, it could be extra administration. I could see that coming, that it starts to feel painful. But actually, if the UK can be at a place where every company has to prove by 23 its transition plan to work, then actually it will have to have technology at a totally different level in there, and it will have to prove and force people to come to the table. So I think those are the sort of steps which is starting to feel quite crunchy and making a difference. And to come back, I'd love to see that the rest of COP will bring us back to 1.5. That's not the mood music, but I think those 5 are really quite material for us all. If they can come through, right? If the veracity of the 130 trillion is truly there, etc. And what we're seeing, just to come back to one of the earlier points, is we're seeing from CEOs, we did a study that was announced on Monday of over 1,000 CEOs, and the finance community has moved from 8th in influencing CEOs to number 3. The first, customers. The second, employees. The third, now, the finance sector. And that's hugely material, because when you have employee base, you have your revenue line, and you have actually who provides your capital, all determining your future. I think we're entering a fairly different time.
Jean-Marc, I mean, you talked earlier on about the digital potential, the green cloud and so on, but is there a risk of a little bit of, the illusion of digital, that it looks virtual, but actually, as we all know, for example, from Bitcoin and so on, there can be a huge carbon footprint of this stuff. So even if it's not that easy to see, actually there's massive negative consequences. Yeah, are we putting too much faith and optimism in this scope to go?
Look, we need after it's a question of belief. We always deal with some kind of technology disruption in the history of humanity, and this has helped us to get to where we are today. I think when I look at what you say was a kind of scenario of lower growth or no growth, or when you look at COP and when you look at climate change, it's fundamentally a global topic. And we can decide in some part of the world to go for a decrease of the economy. It's not a scenario that many other people in the emerging economy will accept. So we have to also look at what is realistic for us as a planet to agree on. On the scenario where we say, well, in Europe and in the US, we enjoy good life for many years with growth, but now we're going to change that for other parts of the world. It's not a scenario that will ever be agreed. So we have to be realistic that the governance of today's planet have some constraints around the scope of what can be agreed or not agreed. That's why I think we need to demonstrate our ability to innovate, to cope with some growth, because some of these emerging economies will consume more, will want to benefit from societal progress, while disconnecting that growth from CO2 emission. And that's what we have done in the last 10 years. When you look at the last 20 years even, it's pretty clear that in some part of the world, we disconnect economic growth from CO2 emission or from greenhouse gas emission, quite in a material way when you look at it. Now, is it good enough? Unfortunately, no. So the real challenge we see is how those innovation in technology will create the step change we need. And as I say today, many of the technology are there. Some are not yet economical. And some sectors that we need to decarbonize generally will say, we cannot do it on an economic basis right now. And we need more investments to make those technology affordable for our own business. I'm talking about steel, I'm talking about cement, I'm talking about very heavy asset industries that don't have yet today a solution to fully decarbonize. We have probably good enough for 2030, but not for 2050. So are we going to stop investing in technology or ask them to stop? I'm not sure. I think we need to keep the research, the academic research, the government impulsion on research and development to continue to innovate, but also the capital and the investments from the private sector to scale those technology to a price point that is economically affordable. And we do not have yet the answer for every sector. Talking to the CEO of some aviation company, sustainable fuel for aviation is good. Is it good enough? No. Is it the right price point? No. Are we going to stop it? No, we're going to continue. So we today, in the vast decarbonization of the planet we have to do, we have many industries where we believe we have the solution. I think as Simon said, for our own business, for many professional services business, and tech business, we seem to have enough. The power sector has been, frankly, doing pretty well for a difficult industry in terms of decarbonization agenda. But do we have a solution for everybody? Not yet. And that's why this mobilization is important in my view, because you can be on the pessimistic side to say, well, we don't have the technology, it's never going to work, and we have to do something else. Or you have to say, look, when you look at what the planet has done last year with COVID, finding a vaccine in less than 12 months, maybe we can expect that in the next 10 years, not the next year, the next 10 years, we're going to innovate and find solutions that will have a radical influence on what we have to get done. If you believe that, you are more like me on the optimistic side. Now, do I have the answer? No. I'm talking every day to large-scale enterprise, industry sector that don't have yet the economical way to achieve net zero by 2050. They know what they have to do for the next 10 years, but they are betting that some technology will become a failure. That's the situation we are in. We probably have all the technology, but not all of them are affordable right now. And I think I'm not in the belief that subsidy from government will be good enough, because subsidies are potentially in $1 billion. They are not in $1 trillion. And what we are talking about is $1 trillion. And if you want to attract $1 trillion from good financial services institution, you're going to have to get some economic business case. And that's what is at stake. And we will see, that's why I believe it's great to have this next generation mobilized, it's great to have the academic sector mobilized, because we need a couple of breakthrough technology. That's what also Bill Gates, as you say, mentioned, but many people mentioned that there is a couple of breakthrough technologies that we need to invent in the next couple of years to find a solution. Is it being too optimistic? I don't think so, but we have to accept with some humility that we don't know everything.
Gregor, briefly, I believe you've been investing in some carbon capture as part of new production and so on, haven't you? But I mean, how far do you think we are still technologically for the real transformative tools that you need in the power sector?
Well, I've been involved in carbon capture over the last 10, 14 years, and we've been very close to doing it at Peterhead. Amber Rudd, the BEIS secretary in 2015 at Paris, actually talked about, Peterhead being the carbon capture of the world, and then a week later had to pull out because the money had to go in tax credits. So we've been at the altar and just kind of lost the opportunity. The UK government have, to be fair, now really pushed that forward. There's two kind of preferred areas in terms of the northeast and the northwest, the Humber project in the northeast, and the Acorn project, which is the Scottish project, has been put in the reserve list. I think the technology is there, but we need to get on and actually start delivering it. And the disappointing thing about the Acorn Scottish project is that we were probably more advanced actually putting something in. Governments have to take more risk. And I don't want to talk about technologies, but if governments say, well, we'll take the easy bit and try and put money into nuclear and whatever, that's going to be too long. We need to get on with it.
So we're almost out of time. Carol, just in one sentence, if you had one ask, one thing that you need, either internally or externally, to really push you forward to the next step, what would it be?
Yeah, I think we didn't mention the subsidies for fossil fuels, I think, which is a massive amount of money and public money, which is ending up in subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. And I think if we are talking about economics and so on, there is no economics fair playing ground if the one sector that is actually or fuels which are accelerating climate change are still being subsidized. And this is the big part which needs to stop. And this will be the big change, and it will show actually how cheap it's and clean renewable energy. And that's the first and the only ask.
So a perfect issue back to pricing. So I'm afraid we're out of time. Obviously, we've heard some great sort of sense of momentum, a lot of activity by business, a lot of pressures, of course, for change, but also lots of, how to put it, ambiguities and uncertainties ahead, including nuances in the way all of the different organisations here we've heard and others are interpreting net zero. We're certainly far from yet achieving it, even if the pace of travel is accelerating. But in any case, thank you all for attending. Thank you all for watching online, and I think back to Jean-Marc for a concluding remark.
No, thanks, Andrew, and thanks for the opportunity to have this dialogue. I think we really believe that the next decade is all about accelerating and about delivering towards that journey. And I was very pleased to have this discussion across many industries because I think collectively we can make significant progress if we work together. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.